Welcome to the show Gold Squadron Gays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays talk about and review their favorite Star Wars content while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and I'm going to hell.
Oh,
Bradley is.
Are we just saying regular, normal things that just like we already all knew?
Bradley and I were having a conversation before we switched over to this episode about Star Trek. I made a comment about Leonard McCoy that made Bradley immediately need to turn on the episode because he was tired of hearing me talk about my attraction to Leonard McCoy in the original series and also the movies. But we have to move on to Star Wars because we're not a Star Trek podcast,
That's
Bradley.
Right.
Yes, he's very insistent. You don't want to do a Strange New Worlds podcast? I'm armed with all of the knowledge from the original series. I can be annoying there too, Bradley.
I
promise.
They mix. We can't do Star Wars and Star Trek. It doesn't mix.
Yeah, no podcast duo could do Star Wars and Star Trek. That would be crazy. Why would they do that? Unrelatedly, you should definitely listen to both Dark Side Divas and Holodeck Divas. Speaking of people who have also talked about the High Republic as well, that's the segue that I'm going to go with. Trials of the Jedi is out, the final High Republic book. And Bradley, we've kind of kept you in the dark for the High Republic,
Right.
deliberately so. However, I do have to say I am reading it now. I am about 2/3 of the way through. And I'm a little annoyed that Bradley needed to record this morning because I really wanted to finish it because this book fucking rules.
You're gonna get spoilers
Bradley,
right now. I'm gonna tell you everything because
Listen.
I actually looked up all the spoilers. And I'm gonna just read them to you. So and so
Oh,
dies.
no.
So and so dies.
People are already dying. People are dying in this book. It's the series finale. People are dropping. Sure. I think it's hilarious though. And what I wanted to talk about on the pod is when I heard the plot synopsis for this book, I went, wait a minute. So stop me if you've heard this one before, Bradley. So without getting into too many spoilers, Trials of the Jedi revolves around a specific group of selected 9 Jedi. There's 9 people who have to undertake a mission deep into an area that one should not simply be able to walk into in order to transport a dangerous item to the middle of that area in order to defeat the bad guy. Also, the bad guy has a giant tower, and there is an eye on top of that tower. Is any of this starting to sound familiar? Group of 9 people who are having to transport a dangerous item deep into enemy territory.
So like almost like a fellowship of people.
One might call it a fellowship.
Right. Interesting.
One might call it a company. Yeah, no. Phase 3 has borrowed an insane amount from Lord of the Rings, and
Interesting.
I could not be happier with it.
Love that crossover for you.
So here's the funny thing, right? Without getting into too many spoilers. There is a moment in Phase 1 that is basically Titanic meets Star Wars.
Okay, I was jokingly gonna say Titanic earlier, like before I even knew what plot you were gonna tell me.
Oh no, they actually do the Titanic at one point.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's crazy.
They actually genuinely do the Titanic, which I was a Titanic gay when I was a kid.
Sure.
I think we all had a Titanic phase. I was a Titanic gay. And they did that, and I was like, this is a weirdly specific way to combine some of my historic interests together. And now they've done Lord of the Rings, which is my favorite movie of all time. And I'm like, okay, so this whole publishing initiative has just you been combining Star Wars with things I already like. I see you, Charles Soule and Kevin Scott. This book rules, and we need to talk about Andor so I can go back to it.
I guess today we're talking about Andor Season 2, Episode 7, Messenger. Yavin is growing, Wilmon comes for help, Dedra's on Ghorman, and Cassian heeds the call. Charles, what's one thing you liked about this episode and one thing you did not?
One thing I really liked was the Bix stuff. It's much more than I thought I would, actually. When I first watched the episode, I really didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what is going on here? I don't get it. Now that I've kind of taken in a little more of Bix's story up to this point, and I also know where her story's headed at the end of the arc, I like it a lot. Also, Audrey Arjona's acting absolutely nailing every single scene that she is in. It is incredible. One thing I didn't like about this episode is not really this episode's fault, but this is kind of the last episode where we're doing the moving pieces into place of it all. We will never have a moving pieces into place episode again. We will just it's going to be hitting the ground running from this point forward. The next 5 episodes are just going to be insane. But this is the last one where we're kind of setting up all the pieces to the Ghorman massacre. And I do feel like, again, had this whole arc been a season on its own, this would have comprised, I feel like, the vast majority of the season would have been building even more build up to the Ghorman massacre. But as it stands, it's this episode, not really a problem with the episode. It's just by nature of where it has to fall. Before we have a really big one, we got to move all the pieces into place. What about you, Bradley? One thing you liked and one thing you did not.
One thing I liked about this episode was I just like the visual aesthetic of being on Yavin. I like just being there and just actually doing something there. I feel like we haven't really done that in a while. There's not been a lot of like, hey, let's just hang out on Yavin for a little bit. Like, and so that's why like a pretty good chunk of this episode is on Yavin. So I just really like that. Or Yavin 4, I should say.
The fourth moon of Yavin. Yeah,
The
Yavin's
fourth
that big red ball.
Every
That's
time I do
technically
that,
Yavin.
every time I say that every time, I always say on Yavin. They're on Yavin, but I'm like, they're not on Yavin. They're on Yavin 4.
They're on
So
Yavin 4.
yeah. Anyway, I always do that, but I just like the aesthetic of Yavin. I like really like seeing it. What I didn't like about the episode, you know what? Honestly, I didn't really have too much I didn't really care for. This was, like you said, this is a moving pieces into place episode. I don't think it's a bad moving pieces into place episode. I think it's just a, like, okay. Like, this is just the first half of essentially the Ghorman massacre. Really, like it's just like got to really set up for the push the gas next week. So I think that this is just like it is a product of like, okay, we know next week's gonna be way better. Like that's all it is. So I don't have necessarily anything specific like I didn't like about it. It was just kind of like, okay, I liked it. It was whatever. Nothing super crazy about this episode. So
Do you have, before we dive in? See, I remember. I
oh,
remember the
you remembered
format.
this time. I like it.
It is a year later.
One
We
year
are now
later.
in 2 BBY or BBY2 according to the
I
title
don't accept
graphic.
that as canon, but
I
yes.
don't accept that either. So, Bradley, why don't you tell us what happens in 2 BBY?
Well,
Because
there's
BBY
right.
stands for Before the Battle of Yavin. It doesn't make
Correct.
sense to put it first. I guess there's some real life dating formats where technically it should be in front. I think in Star Wars land, 2 Before the Battle of Yavin makes more sense than Before the Battle of Yavin 2, but whatever, we're stuck with this format. Bradley, tell us what happens in 2 BBY.
So a couple random things happen in this year, the year of our Lord Ahsoka Tano. Grand Admiral Thrawn is
I'm pretty sure she's
deployed.
not in this year.
I know, I'm kidding.
I'm pretty
Um,
sure she's literally absent from this year.
well, this is kind of I didn't have anything on Ahsoka, which is interesting, because this is kind of taking place between the third and fourth season of Rebels, is kind of where this takes place. So for your frame of reference, I don't know if she's really in that bit as
She's
much.
literally not in the year. So at the end of season 2, spoilers for Rebels, by the way, if you're somehow listening to these episodes and you've never watched Rebels. At the end of season 2, which we established was last year, 3 BBY, Ahsoka Tano is in the temple on Malachor when it
Right.
blows up.
Uh-huh.
And she doesn't get yeeted through time
I forgot about this.
until the battle of the liberation of Lothal. It's not a
Right.
battle, but she doesn't get that until the liberation of Lothal because it's happening basically the same day
Oh
or
yeah,
like a
that's I
day or
totally
two
forgot about this.
prior to Thrawn getting yoinked to Peridia. So,
Interesting.
yeah, she's literally not in this year.
That's
She
really
does
funny.
not exist right
She
now.
doesn't exist. Yeah, okay. Um, I'm glad you said that because I totally forgot about that. And I forgot that's the thing. So let's talk about stuff that actually happens.
Yes.
So
What actually happens in 2 BBY?
so Grand Admiral Thrawn is deployed to confront the growing rebellion. Phoenix Cell acquires Y-wing assault bombers from the Reclam Station salvage yard. Some little connection there for us. The Mandalorian Civil War begins. Darth Maul has one final duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi and is killed. Rip. Darth Maul And then this one you'll like. Darth Vader and Thrawn investigate a disturbance in the Force and come face to face with the Grisk, which threatens to bring the Chiss ascendancy into civil war. Due to his duty to the Empire, however, Thrawn is unable to return home to help his people. And I say that because this is the plot of Thrawn Alliances, which is set between the third and fourth season of Rebels. For anyone who doesn't know that, I guess, is that a spoiler?
Not really.
Oh, okay, just making sure before I just like threw that out there. But
Look, we already did a spoiler warning for Rebels. Anything from Rebels is fair game at this point.
there you go. So that's all kind of going on during this year. So it is the ramping up of the rebellion. It's kind of getting
Yes.
to a boiling
Is the
point.
Battle of Adelon this year?
I think that was on there. I didn't write it down, but that stands out to me. But let me
The
just double
Battle
check
of
with you.
Adelon is the end of season 3 of Rebels. So
Okay,
basically, season 3 of Rebels is happening while this block of episodes is happening for Andor.
got it. Okay. Well, I love that.
I love that for them.
I love that for them.
And you're going to return to the regular format, right?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I guess I should preface with I have, because of the way this arc is structured, I thought it would be best to go back to our traditional format. I do play around slightly with some scenes just to kind of combine them a little bit, only because there's like one scene where like Cyril's walking through the plaza, but like it's in between the actual action that's happening. So I just didn't include it with the thing. So it only gets kind of messy towards the end when they actually leave for Ghorman, but it'll make sense when I read it. So
Okay. I'm trusting you because my notes are in chronological order.
there, trust me, I don't jump around too much. I keep it as pretty together as it
I also
possibly can.
just took my notes on the episode this morning because I came home from work yesterday and was like, I
Okay.
will do my notes for this episode after I read one chapter of Trials of the Jedi, and then I read half the book.
Alrighty.
It's a really good book.
Section 1. Into BBY at the Rebel base on Yavin 4, Wilmon arrives and reunites with Cassian and Bix, who live in a tree hut near the base. Wilmon delivers a message from Luthen. He wants Cassian to assassinate ISB supervisor Dedra, who was responsible for the destruction of Ferrix and the death of Wilmon's father. Cassian refuses and storms off.
We are finally on the Yavin Revel base. And I do wish this had been 3 seasons because I feel like if it had, we would have seen them constructing this base or how they even found this place. Because I know Cassian jets off from Yavin when he's done with the Maya Pei Brigade, but we don't get that connective tissue between that and okay, there's now a base on Yavin. We have moved into the
Right.
temple.
You're missing a whole entire plot.
Like, was somebody from did they run into people from the Maya Pei Brigade who'd survived? Like,
Who
what happened
knows?
here? We don't know. The base is here now.
It just exists.
It just exists now, which is very cool to see, but it's just kind of here. They also have paperwork now, and that's kind of important.
Okay.
That the first lines of dialogue we see are this sort of intake personnel essentially telling new recruits like you need to go check in with the duty officer and you can get meal vouchers and you can get
Right.
all of this stuff. You've got to follow procedure because they have these procedures now. The rebellion's becoming more militarized. So being rather than random groups, it is starting to get much more structure. And we also saw in Star Wars Rebels, like in season 2, when the Ghost Crew joins the larger rebellion, some of the members are actually not okay with that. Some of the members do not like having ranks and structure and procedure.
Right.
But this is something that's happening. The rebellion is growing and it has to institute these things in order to survive. Also, Wilmon is here now, which, again, like I said at the end of the Saw arc,
Yeah.
I struggle to make this make sense to
It's
me
like
with
why? Yeah.
where his character went in Saw arc because here's the thing, right? At the end of the Saw arc, he was like breathing in the freedom air or whatever.
Right.
He was breathing in the freedom drugs. He was very specifically like having an experience antithetical to Luthen. And we're going to find out later in this scene that he's like super loyal to Luthen.
Yeah, he's like directly working
Like
for him now. Like,
he's directly working for Luthen. He is kind of like ignoring the Yavin base such as he can to go do stuff for
right.
Luthen. And like, this doesn't make sense for me with the last arc.
It doesn't. There's a whole season missing.
There is a whole season
Like,
missing for his character.
for
Yeah,
his
there's a whole
character
season
arc, yes,
for
there's
his
a whole season
character.
missing. Yeah.
and it doesn't it I struggle to make that reconcile. Like,
Yeah.
I like his character in these arcs. I like how he's come around fully, like, because Wilmon was someone who didn't really want to commit. He like Cassian didn't want to commit to the rebellion.
Right.
And he's committed to Luthen personally.
Yeah.
And I think we see kind of in this arc him broadly committing to the ideals of the rebellion, but also like he's not in any future media, so that's gonna kind of that plot line's gonna kind of peter out.
Right.
So I don't know. I see the scars. I see the scars from the cuts. I also see the Wilman was not supposed to be at the transport at the end of season one, and we didn't quite know what to do with him
Yeah.
of it.
I can't because I feel like all they had to do was just, I mean, I'm not saying this is what I would have wanted, but like to solve that issue, all they had to do was have one of the people on Ferrix shoot him in the riot. Like it would have just been like, okay, he died. And then it would have been sad, but it would have been like, okay, but he helped start the revolution essentially, right? And he died for it.
Yeah, and sometimes this happens with TV shows, with characters, with books, with anything that you write. You have a character who was intended to go one way and went a different way. And you can kind of tell when the writer or writers are able to compensate for that
Hmm.
and when they don't.
Yeah.
Bix had a very strong plan. Cassian had a very strong plan. Vel had kind of a plan that you can sort of see.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wilman, I think they got him off Ferrix and they just didn't know what to do with him.
I just wish they would have committed to the bit. I actually really like the plot of him being essentially turned by Saw into a radical. Like it would have been more of an interesting plot to be like, oh, he's trying to be like, do things the right way, but then Saw, is Saw and he can convince people and, cause people to do stuff they wouldn't necessarily normally do. And I think that would have been a way more interesting plot and then have Cassian try to bring him back to the the good side, I guess.
Well, I'll pitch an alternate plot, which is to say he drank the freedom juice
Right.
and then decided, holy shit, that's insane. I'm gonna super double down on Luthen, which may also be why Wilman is willing to work around the Yavin people because he's had this experience with Saul and he's taken something away from it.
Right.
But he didn't want to commit to Saul's particular brand of crazy,
Right. Right. Right.
which it feels like that was what they were going for, but it's missing a lot of connective tissue to make it work. I love that everybody else is sleeping in a barracks and Cassian and Bix have a little treehouse in the
Okay, wait.
forest.
We need to talk about this Gilligan's Island nonsense. Like, why are they in this fancy ass house, like in the middle of the woods, separate, private, away from everybody else? It's a bungalow, basically.
Yeah,
And
they have a little
everybody else is
fucking
sleeping on
bungalow.
cots. Like, what is this?
Well, and even when spoilers for Star Wars, I guess, Mon
Right.
Mothma joins the rebellion, it's kind of implied she's sharing a room with her cousin.
Yeah, so strange.
Like, I guess it tracks with Cassian's isolation.
Yeah, but who built the house?
Probably Cassian.
But like, when did he have the time? So this whole past year he's been building this house for him and Bix,
I,
like on Yavin.
I don't. I look. I don't know.
It
I
just
don't know.
seems
I think
odd.
they
Like, yeah,
just it kind of highlights his separation from the rest of the rebellion. But
yeah,
on the other hand, like logistically, when did he build this? Also, why are they allowing this?
that part.
Also, like what?
So wait, he has a permanent house next to the base, but he doesn't want to be a part of the thing, like or follow the rules necessarily. I don't know. I don't quite understand that
He's
aspect of it.
waffling. He's back and forth.
Yeah,
He doesn't really like. He wants to do stuff for the rebellion, but he's not all in.
right.
And like he won't be all in until the end of this arc. And even then he's not going to really be all in until the end of the show, which does make Rogue One
Right.
more interesting, but we'll get there when we get there. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess the real thing is they wanted these characters to have privacy and the ability to have these conversations and also
Mhm.
like you don't have to pay for extras.
That part. That's also a
Mhm.
good from a production standpoint. Yeah, if you
You
have a
don't
private
have to pay
house
for
in the
extras.
jungle away from everybody else. Yeah.
This is not the only note I will have that rings very much as a choice made by the producers decision for this episode. Hello, shirtless Cassian.
Shirtless number one, Cassian. Yes. I
Shirtless
think
Cassian
we
number
get it
one.
slightly later on when he's checking his wound again, but this is more prominent. Like, okay, here's his little hairy chest. Like,
And thank God for that.
I do want to point out that he is not in the same, like when we do like chest reveals or like for men usually or whatever, they always have to be like shredded and ripped and like whatever obscenely like muscly. He's got a different like I'm not saying he's
He
it's
looks
not
like a
dad bod
norm.
exactly, but he
Yeah,
looks
he looks like a
normal.
normal fucking dude.
Yes,
I
that's
actually I
yeah,
actually loved that
right.
because yeah, like you said, we're used to at this point like if the shirt is going to come off, it's going to be Kylo Ren's giant titties in The Last Jedi
That's what I'm saying. It's someone who's
or
built to
Anakin
hell. Yeah.
Skywalker being absolutely jacked
Yeah.
or you're going to get a Marvel superhero bod, but like both of those people I just named are force users
True.
who are doing insane amount of training.
That's true.
Cassian Andor is just a normal fucking dude.
He's a guy.
Like he's just a guy. And that made this scene so much better for me.
Yeah.
Because I was like, yeah, that's what a normal fucking dude looks like with his shirt off. Like he's not got giant man titties like Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi. He's got a
Right.
little bit, he's got chest hair going on. He's got, he just looks like a normal fucking attractive dude.
Yeah, because like
And I
when did
love
you have
that for
time to
this
work
show.
out during the rebellion?
You don't, because you're always on mission.
Exactly.
So
So
like
I
maybe
love
he's
that for
working
him.
out. And also that's a nice thing too, because yeah, he's obviously in good physical shape
Right.
because he's going on these missions and they're not going to let him do it if he isn't.
Right.
But also being in good physical shape doesn't necessarily mean you have washboard abs and giant pecs. Like you can be in good physical shape and just look like a normal fucking dude.
I like how we're saying this, but then flash forward to Star Wars Starfighter when Ryan Gosling rips open
Oh,
his
and he's gonna
shirt
have
and
six pack abs
and he's
and
gonna be like,
we're
"You're a
gonna be
pilot. Why are
back
you
to
shredded
normal.
to hell?"
Oh my lord.
I love it.
I also love just how in love Bix and Cassian are. It's very clear that these two are fucking.
Yeah, they've officially domesticated. This
They've
is
officially
yeah.
domesticated. They've adopted a child together. A fully grown adult man has their child
An
together.
adult teen man who doesn't want to follow the rules or listen to his dad.
Right, which they are parenting the hell out of Wilmon, which makes sense because right now, of the Ferrex people, because I think her name is Juzzy or something, fucking disappeared in
Yeah, we
between
have no idea
seasons.
what happened. Yeah,
Brasso's dead.
right.
It's only these three left
So they're
from Ferrex.
essentially his de facto parents. Yeah,
They're his de facto parents,
right.
which they immediately start parenting him because he's fallen in with a boss that Cassian doesn't trust.
Right.
Which is my next note that Wilmon is still talking to Luthen. Cassian has been ignoring him since their conversation on the ship,
Right.
or rather, their conversation at the gallery. Cassian just doesn't want to talk to him.
Oh yeah, I guess that is the last time they kind of spoke
That's the last
together.
time they met face to face, and now
Right.
clearly they accepted the mission to kill Dr. Gorse. But after that,
Right.
Cassian's been working for the rebellion on Yavin, who do not like Luthen,
Mm,
and there are comments that are made that Luthen's still doing his own thing separately from the Yavin base.
right.
The Yavin base is trying to build a force to actually oppose the Empire. Luthen is still doing his spycraft. They are not working together. And Cassian believes that Luthen wants to burn Ghorman to the ground
Right.
in order to get his thing that's going to burn very brightly, which based on what Luthen said is not an insane thing to think. Also, Luthen is not in this episode.
Right. They talk about him a lot, but he's just
We're
not
talking about
there.
him a lot.
Yeah.
Luthen is not in this episode.
Hmm.
I want to point that out. I also want to shout out the amount of facial acting being done by Diego Luna and Audrey Arjona while Wilmon is giving his like Dedra is on Ghorman, we can fucking kill her
Right.
pitch. These two don't say a lot during this pitch.
Yeah.
They let their faces do a lot of the acting.
They're kind of like silently talking to each other without actually saying much. Especially when Wilman, I think after Cassian leaves, Wilman's like, Dedra's a monster. Like we have to kill her. Like she's clearly like evil or whatever. And Bix is just kind of like going through all these different internal emotions the whole entire time.
I
She
mean,
doesn't say
because
anything.
Dedra did torture her, and also she did fucking murder Dr. Gorst. So, like, she gets it.
Section 2. On Ghorman, Cyril walks through the Palmo Plaza, while news reporters describe ongoing terrorist attacks across Ghorman. Inside her office, Dedra is briefed by Partagaz that the Empire will proceed with the resource extraction on Ghorman. Partagaz informs her that Captain Kaido, a crisis specialist, will support her. Outside her office, Cyril arrives, frustrated with the events unfolding. She assures him that they will soon return to Coruscant and be rewarded. When Cyril questions it, she forcefully kisses him, telling him to be careful.
I live in Los Angeles.
Okay.
This is very relevant because I had a certain opinion of this episode and of the next episode. I had a certain opinion when I watched it the first time. I had a certain opinion when I watched it the second time. Some stuff has happened in between the last time I watched this and the current time I watched this morning that has colored my reaction
Oh,
to
wow.
some of the things that happened in this episode. There's a lot in these episodes that mirror some of the things that we have seen in Los Angeles regarding the protest against ICE. However, I would caution very strongly against taking the overly simplistic view that there is a one-to-one comparison. I have definitely seen people on social media making a one-to-one comparison. I would caution against taking too much of a simplistic comparison
Okay.
because we have seen the current administration use some of the same tactics in Los Angeles in an attempt to justify federalizing the National Guard and sending in the Marines, as we see the Empire use in this episode and the next episode of Andor. That is my take as a resident of Los Angeles. I know we want these episodes to be a little more timeless, so we try not to bring in direct comparisons. However, I do have to say up front that I am going to say that I have personally seen some of these tactics used in the past couple of weeks. Bradley does not live in Los Angeles
No,
yet.
I don't live on Gorman yet, but I will
Yes,
continue.
you are not on the ground. But one of the things we do see is that Palmo Square is now locked down. They have closed off the square. Cyril needs to show identification just to get into the square,
Right.
which is also going to damage local commerce because we see there's a hotel in there. There's an imperial curfew now.
Yep.
There are shops in there. There's Carol Rylance's shop is on the square that nobody can access now. So it's
Right.
disrupting the civilian life in Palmo. We also see the way that the imperial media is covering Ghorman. Because part of my big problem over the last couple of weeks is that what the media is showing people and what social media, it's not just the mainstream media that's doing this. I have literally had to watch my city burn down on social media and then promptly leave my unburned down apartment and go to my unburned down grocery store. And I live pretty close to, like, comparatively to Los Angeles. Like, I live in kind of this weird little pocket in the middle of Los Angeles. Los Angeles is huge, but I'm pretty close
Yeah.
to where everything was going down comparatively. The way that I have had to watch like these scenes that kind of imply that the whole city is locked down, and I'm like, no, city's huge,
Right.
guys.
Yeah.
The city is big. The city, even just the metro Los Angeles area, is massive. If you ever come out here, go to the Griffith Observatory. I get that it's a tourist site. I get it.
No, but you can
The
see
Griffith
everything.
Observatory is the best spot to really get an understanding horizon to horizon. That's how big Los Angeles is. And yet, people say Los Angeles when they say on the news and when they say on social media, quote unquote, Los Angeles, they're really underselling like just how big of a city this is. And so it's really quite alarming watching the Empire, like the way that they have the media talking about there's all this Gorman aggression, there's all these attacks, this armory in Palmo was attacked, yada yada yada. And it's kind of creepy watching, knowing that I've now watched the disconnect between what people are reporting and what people are sharing on social media. I'm not gonna fucking let you off the hook if you are on here like freaking out on social media and deliberately, especially if you live in LA, if you know that that's not like actually what it is on the ground. I'm not going to let you off the hook either, but specifically in Andor, watching the news media talk about how the city is burning, it's on fire, everything is terrible, and it's like you're yes, that stuff is scary and we should be paying attention to it, but also like you guys are going for a vibe here that's not my lived experience on the ground, and it's kind of alarming.
And it's worth
So,
noting that like this is also galaxy wide. There,
yes,
we're talking about like on a galaxy scale. So people will hear that and just assume, I guess in this reality, that it's the whole planet. Or, you know what I mean?
yep,
Like it's not just the one city on the planet. It's like, oh, well, if it's happening in the capital or essentially Paris of Star Wars, then it must be
right.
happening everywhere else.
They're playing on the sort of size bias
Yes.
that because they're bringing up like there was violence in this city, there was violence in this city, because if you have one instance of violence in a particular city, you can then generalize it to the whole city because somebody who's outside it or to the whole planet. Or if you get multiple, like if you get multiple cities, then you can make that claim about the entire state or the entire planet no matter how big it is, no matter how many people are there, no matter how much is actually there, because that's a tactic that we see the media in the even in this scene where he's walking through the square use is they say, well, there's terrorist attacks here, here, and here. We're going to come back to that word in a later scene. But one of the tactics they're using is to try to, yeah, make it look like, oh, the entire planet is in uproar. The entire planet is revolting when we really do see like in this episode, yeah, the resistance has gotten bigger, but people are not like firebombing stormtroopers in the street the way that the
Right.
ISB clearly wants them to do. I also think it's funny that Partagaz keeps Dedra waiting, kind of still dismissing her, but there is something very interesting with what he says when he immediately gets on the call as to why he kept her waiting, and that is Emperor Palpatine has personally given them the go ahead for Ghorman.
Interesting.
So this goes all the way to the top, and you know how important something has to be for Emperor Palpatine to get involved in it. That dude is not a bureaucrat.
Right, because normally he doesn't care.
Normally, he doesn't give a shit. He's this weird religious zealot that sits at the top and delegates the task of running the empire to Masameda and Sate Pestege. Like, he doesn't give a shit about this. He'd much rather do imperial, like he'd rather do his Sith Lord stuff than he would actually run the empire. So for him to have had to take in a meeting and then personally give the go ahead, like, yeah, go ahead and just strip mine Ghorman,
Yeah, he's just
that's a
like,
big
eh,
deal.
fuck it. Which I do want to bring up the strip mining thing. So Pargas does drop the little tidbit of information about
The lab on Edu
the lab on
tried to
Edu.
replicate Calkite and it didn't work.
Right. Which do you find suspicious that it didn't
There
work?
is a headcanon that I have heard that Galen Urso deliberately
Right.
didn't find a Calkite alternative in order to delay production of the Death Star.
Right.
I think that's a decent enough headcanon going back and watching this episode. I disagree with it just because that's not Galen Urso's area of expertise.
Mm,
I
okay.
don't think that's what happened. He is very specifically the laser guy, and they need
Right.
Calkite for the reactors, reactor coding. I don't know if although he did work on, I will walk that back actually. I'm just now realizing he did work on the reactor
Okay.
because he was the one that built the flaw into the Death Star
Right.
because there'll be a chain reaction and that reaction is with the reactor. So yeah, it's entirely possible that there was a Calkite alternative and Galen Urso just stalled them,
Right.
hoping that they wouldn't ever find a way to do it. I don't know. I think if he knew that there was real Calkite on Ghorman, and I think he's too smart to not know, I think he would have allowed them to find the alternative at some point
Hmm.
to try to avoid getting like Ghorman strip mined. But also, it's hard to say. It's
It's
hard to say
hard to
like what
say. I
Galen
mean,
Urso actually knew.
right, because like if even if you do it at like the oh well the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many kind of thing, like maybe he juggled in his head like, well, if I stall the Death Star stuff, then that's billions of people that will die, versus the couple million that'll die on Gorman, I don't know if any of that's true, but it's just like a fun headcanon to be like he had to kind of play with decision making process of how many millions of people he was gonna give up to.
Yeah, and that's the question with Galen Urso.
Yeah, you never know.
You never know. We do see that the ISB has fully taken over the dome. So Cyril's been basically kicked out of his office,
Right. Which is probably why he's pissed constantly.
which is probably why he's pissed constantly.
Right.
Because he's being more and more shut out as he becomes less and less useful,
Right.
and that's going to chafe him. And also, like we'll see later, he's going to ask questions. Is like we'll get to that when we get to that. We also do meet Captain Kaido.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about Captain Kaido?
I do, because I actually have some interesting stuff on him. He's more important, I think, in the next episode, but he'll come up in a later scene. So,
We'll
but we'll
talk
talk
about him
about him
now
now.
because we don't want to
Yeah.
break the flow of the next episode. We
Right.
first meet him when Cyril tries to get into Dedra's office.
Right. Captain Kaido is played by John Joe O'Neill. He is known for the TV series Bad Sisters. He was also in a show called The New Look, starring Ben Mendelsohn. Uh,
Nice.
then he was also, that's only his first Star Wars connection. His second Star Wars connection, he was in a film called All the Old Knives, which I was going to bring up later because it is directed by Dan Gilroy, who also stars Tandy Newton from Solo is in that movie. So,
Hmm.
he's got two Star Wars connections. He was with Ben Mendelsohn in a show, and he was also with Tandy Newton in a movie. So, fun little connection there. And
Interesting.
that's not the only character. I have another character, new character later, who's also has a Star Wars connection. That's interesting. So we'll
Interesting.
get to that when we get to that. But yeah, that is Captain Kaido.
Partagas also, like, as Dedra is starting to question things, the thing he brings up specifically to keep her, like, moving forward is that he specifically says he wants to secure the ISB's position at the Emperor's side. So Partagas can see the writing on the wall.
Hmm.
He can see that the ISB is going to start getting phased out, and he wants to avoid that.
Right, because if there's no use for the ISB, then there's no use for any of them in their positions. They don't need them. They're just
And do
extraneous.
they think they're going to let them retire?
Right. That's not a
I
thing.
mean, the ISB will probably continue in a diminished capacity. It just won't get a lot of resources and it won't get a lot of personnel.
Right. And so it probably would help to be at the top of the ISB so that you don't get got.
So you
got.
get folded into something else and you don't get
Right.
got.
Yeah, you don't get got.
So the scene with Dedra and Cyril, where Dedra tries to tell Cyril, like, oh, we think there's outside agitators
Right.
that did this because that's what he's been told the whole time. And something he specifically mentions is he's like, one, why aren't you bringing me in if that's the case? I've been here for 2 years.
Right.
But also, two, I'm not hearing that
Yeah, he's like,
because
I'm not buying it.
Cyril now has his own sources. And his own sources are telling him something different than what Dedra is telling him.
And he's not buying the not that she's not lying to him and she's just not telling him everything, right? Like so he's starting to get real suspicious.
Well, at this point, she is lying to him. Like
Oh, well, straight up. Yeah, yeah.
they had some outside agitators, like when Vel and Cinta were there.
Right.
But by this point,
It's just
no,
yeah,
it's
it's
all
just the
gore. It's
Empire.
all
Yeah.
the gore all the
Right.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
She then like insists they will be rewarded, insists that good things are coming to him to try to
Yeah.
like she's trying to do to him what Partagaz is doing to her, where
Right.
it's like, if you just stick this out, good things will happen to you.
Yeah, I think she's almost lying out loud to herself. Like she's kind of
I
like
think there's a
convincing
degree
herself.
of that.
Yeah.
I've talked before about how I think I disagree with the interpretation that Dedra could not feel any love for Cyril, or that she did not like have any sort of romantic feelings for Cyril, because and this is one of the moments that I point to, one of these things between this episode and the next episode, where she's going to keep insisting that like good things are coming, good things are happening, we will be rewarded. I do think she genuinely either believes that or she's trying to convince herself of that.
Right.
And I think that she genuinely does want to bring Cyril up with her. Like, she clearly has no intention of throwing him under the bus. She wants him on a shuttle out of there. She wants him away from this. She wants him to survive. She does not want him to be sacrificed. She really does think, like, if I get rewarded, he's going to get rewarded. I just have to believe Partagaz.
Right.
And then you mentioned that she pretty forcibly kisses him, which is
Like almost against his will. Like it's
almost
pretty
against his will, which
yeah,
is really fucked up.
it's pretty weird. And his reaction too is very like, oh, I've just been assaulted almost. Like he really kind of like,
Yeah,
oh.
kind of, yeah. Like he was not into it.
No, he definitely
He
did
is
not like that.
alarmed by it because it's also a weird thing to do in this moment. It's a
Right.
shut up and stop asking questions kiss.
Exactly.
It is not a romantic one
No.
in this particular case, which is, yeah, really fucked up.
And that's just not, and their relationship is not this like super romantic, let's show affection to each other kind of relationship. So I feel like in
No,
this moment for him, that's a real shock. Like, whoa, we don't do that,
that's a
especially in
big red
public.
flag.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, she does it in public. She does it on the lips. She does it
yeah.
because we also see that, like, in the creepy little kiss scene that they have in the apartment in Coruscant, where he like kisses her cheek and it's really icy and awkward. And this is not that.
Yeah,
This
right,
feels wrong.
right.
This feels off both to the audience and it also feels off to Cyril.
Section 3. On Coruscant, Senator Mon Mothma and her aide Erskine Samaj arrive at the Imperial Senate by limousine airspeeder. Mothma considers replacing her driver, but Erskine warns against it, saying his replacement would likely be more competent, implying Cloris may be a spy, but a manageable one. As they approach the Senate, media reports broadcast Imperial spin on the recent Ghorman bombing. Inside, Mon is approached by Ghorman Senator Dossie Oren, who privately expresses distrust of the Empire's narrative about the bombing and warns that Ghorman has reached a breaking point. He thanks her for her support and subtly urges her to be careful as political dangers escalate in the Senate.
So we do see due to Cloris that the ISB knows something is coming, and they know that the Senate's going to have to be. They know the messaging on Ghorman has to be very careful. They cannot risk any of the senators using their massive galactic platform to, I don't know, call this what it is,
Right. Yeah.
publicly denounce the Emperor. That would
Hmm.
be bad.
That would be a terrible idea.
That would be a terrible thing for
I don't
them.
think anyone should do that. That's political suicide. You don't want to do
It's
that.
not only political suicide, it completely upends what the point of Ghorman was, which is
Right.
the Ghormans had to have it coming.
Right.
The
They asked
Ghormans
for
had to
this.
deserve it,
Hmm.
kind of. Like, if they weren't so uppity, maybe they wouldn't have gotten wiped out.
Right.
So anything that potentially threatens that narrative, anyone who could potentially threaten that narrative is already being watched much more closely. And then I love Erskine being like, don't fire your driver. They might send someone good at his job.
Right. Yeah, well, because they both know. Like, it's funny how they
Oh, they
both know
know.
he's a plant. Yeah, and she's known for years that he's a plant. So I just find it funny that because now by this point she's had him for at least 4 or 5 years, right?
He was a new driver in season one. That was five
Right.
BBY. This is two BBY.
Yeah,
So she's had him, yeah, for 4 years.
4 years. Yeah, so she already like the fact that she'd be considering firing him after 4 years is kind of like, no, actually, Erskine's like really smart. He's like, no, you've already done it this long, and we can basically just keep him an eye on him. Like we already know it's the enemy you know versus the enemy you don't know.
I also need to point out that we hear the news broadcasts as Mon and Erskine are entering the Senate, and this is where we really see them hammering home the use of the word terrorist.
Right.
So I don't know how many of our listeners were alive in 2001, 2002. We're now at a point where people who were born after 2002 can legally drink. So I don't know.
Right.
But in case you were not alive or too young to remember in 2001, 2002, this word was fucking everywhere
Yeah.
in the lead up to the Iraq War and the early Iraq War because this was something we had just had the terrorist attacks on 9/11, and that word, it was almost like a Pavlov's dog kind of thing. Like they would say terrorist and the American public would lose their goddamn mind. So that's something that seeped its way into Star Wars. And that's something that they're really drawing from here with this overuse of the word in the news broadcast. Because at the time, like, if you called somebody like a terrorist or you had an opposition that was a terrorist, that really actually very successfully turned the public against them. It was really much easier to do at that point. Nowadays, the word doesn't quite have the same impact that it used to, but I guarantee you in the lead up, there's a reason you see a whole bunch of media that will talk about like the opposing, like the bad guys are terrorists, because that was something that was deeply ingrained in the American public in the years following 9/11.
Right.
So if we remember last year, this guy kind of torpedoed Mon's legislation by refusing to say anything. And like the minute he tells her something is wrong, her first reaction, the first thing out of her mouth is, "How can I help?"
Right.
I love her so much.
I also love how she was like, I mean, it's super sad, but like, is there like a bill I can introduce or like a piece of legislature I can like,
Well,
co-sign or something?
she even admits like that's not going to do anything, because at
It's
this
so
point she
sad.
knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
She knows the game is up. She knows that the Senate has no power. She knows that they're not going to stop the Empire that way.
Yeah.
And like Dossie even says something to the effect of, they don't even bother to lie badly anymore. Why do they need to?
They don't.
The
Yeah.
only reason the only reason they lie to the Senate in Rogue One is they want to hide the Death Star's existence until they have confirmed that the weapon works.
Right.
The galaxy at large finding out about the Death Star is the Death Star blows up Alderaan. That's how people find out. And then the Emperor disbands the Senate, because he's like, I don't even fucking need you anymore.
Yeah. They're
I have a
useless.
giant
Yeah.
death ball that can obliterate planet. But even at this point, like, the Empire doesn't bother. And like Dossie knows this is the end of the line. Mon knows this is the end of the line. You can tell she's basically saying goodbye to her, which is gonna have an impact on her in a later episode, but we gotta move on.
Section 4. At the Ghorman Front HQ, Dylan pressures Caro to commit to a course of action. Caro argues for peaceful resistance, while others, like Sam and Lizine, challenge whether dignity or nonviolence still have meaning. The rebels struggle to agree on tactics, torn between idealism and urgency. Lizine delivers a passionate reminder to their shared identity as Ghor, emphasizing that the Empire has harmed them all and urging unity, regardless of the method of resistance. Later that night, Cyril approaches Enza in secret, offering what he frames as a way out amid Imperial claims of external manipulation. Enza rejects him outright, slapping him and leaving without listening further.
So we do see Caro trying to rein the Gorman front in. He's very indecisive. And it's interesting compared to like where Caro was in the last arc,
Right.
where he was very like,
Pro
go, go,
resistance.
go,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
go, go, go. And now he's starting to get cold feet. And I think that's because he's starting to realize Cassian was right.
Right. He's realizing that even though they've done all this stuff, it's not having an impact as much as they would have
It's
liked.
not. And also, I think he's starting to realize they're falling for the Imperial tricks. Like
Mm,
all this has been manipulated by the Empire.
right.
I also love how the Gorman Bellhop Twink is now in the meeting.
He's a part of it now, yeah.
He has joined the resistance, and Lizine is also in the meeting.
I was gonna say they're definitely growing because they're both now officially a part of it. Before they were kind of like, I think Lazine before was just an angry dude, and then
Yes.
the hotel twink was more like just fed up with like the disrespect, I guess, with the monument and everything. I think now they've kind of like after this whole year of resistance, they've now been brought in, and I just love that.
Yeah, and Lizine actually kind of gets to be a voice of reason, because he gives this whole speech about like, we are the Gore, like that's the core of this. It doesn't really matter. Like, and we will see in the next episode like how the Gore choose to react to provocation. And I think something that's really important is this speech that Lizine gives to the main leaders of the resistance to say, remember, we are the Gore.
Right.
Remember that no matter what, you know, this is who we are. Do we think Cyril and Enza hooked up?
I don't know. I don't
Because
like that theory.
it's
I like, what
this
I
is a
like better.
weird scene.
It doesn't, I feel like there's something missing here because like this is a plot that would have gotten drawn out a little bit more if there was a whole Gorman massacre season. Like there just should have been a whole
Yes,
season.
absolutely.
This subplot of Cyril with the Gormans would have been a whole C plot of him doing, his stuff that he needed to do. One of those things I think would be this interaction with him and Enza. I just don't think it's like, I think he doesn't see it as like a romantic kind of thing. I think maybe she might have been into it at first, being like, oh, he's like this rebel who's trying to help us kind of thing or whatever. I don't know what she thought, but I could see her thinking like maybe something was there. And then now realizing he's just basically Nothing. He hasn't
And we're
helped them at all.
missing all that.
And it's not here. So
And
why
it's
is
not
this,
here.
honestly, why is this scene even here?
So I'll tell you why, actually. It's
Okay.
because so Cyril comes into the scene and it sounds there's a miscommunication happening here between
Right.
Cyril and Inza. Cyril asks about outside agitator because he genuinely, up until this moment, has believed that there are outside agitators.
Right.
He very genuinely, up until this moment, thinks that's what he was there to do. And he basically asks Inza, give him something he can work with to take to them to prove that there are outside agitators involved. And Inza's reaction, which is to slap the shit out of him and storm away, basically sows a lot of doubt that those outside agitators exist.
Right.
Because if there were no outside agitators, she would have told him. And also consider, too, that the Gore just had this meeting where they were reaffirming that they were in this for like the planet. There's nobody coming to help them. They are on their own. They are like committed to fighting back against the Empire, even though they aren't part of this broader rebellion. And
Right.
here's Cyril coming in, basically saying, if there's people outside helping you, this is an insult to the Ghorman front, who are
Right.
really, really patriotic and really, really, they feel like they've been alone. And here's this guy saying, well, you couldn't have clearly done this on your own. There's clearly outside agitators, right? You need to tell me. Of course, she's
Right.
going to slap the shit out of it.
Section 5. Back on Yavin 4, Bix brings Cassian to a force healer, despite his skepticism. Bix urges him to stop ignoring his pain and try healing. The healer senses his untreated shoulder wound and touches it. She experiences a moment of clarity, describing Cassian as someone gathering spirit, implying he has a larger purpose. After he leaves, the healer speaks with Bix, calling Cassian a messenger, with somewhere he needs to be. Back at the tree hut, Cassian notices his wound healing. Bix arrives and notices his healing, and Cassian dismisses the healer as a cook, but Bix insists she is more and that she felt something as well. Bix reveals that she has had dreams that confirm the importance of what's happening. She hugs him, encouraging him to embrace the healer's message.
So Bix has low key found God in the year after Coruscant.
I don't know what's going on here. I think this is a point of contention with people.
Well, Bix clearly believes in the Force.
Right.
And it is not uncommon for people going through a trauma recovery to need to believe in some sort of higher power
Right.
in order to kind of make that work.
Hmm.
That this is something that, like, if you're going through addiction recovery, not the same thing, but the entire impetus behind Alcoholics Anonymous, like, one of the number one things in their sort of philosophy in that group is you have to believe in a higher power. And that higher power doesn't necessarily have to be a deity, but you have to put like a faith in something bigger than yourself. And so the first time I watched this, I was like, has Bix like randomly found God? And then I thought about it for a minute and I was like, no, that actually makes sense with like
Right.
part of how she has been recovering from her trauma is to learn to believe in something that's bigger than herself. Plot twist here is that we know the Force is real.
Yeah, I think that's the problem I have with Star Wars is that a lot of the time these
We do
characters.
know the Force exists.
Right, that's why I don't like about Star Wars sometimes because I feel like sometimes you have these characters who are like, "Oh, the Force is mumbo jumbo and blah blah blah
Oh,
blah blah."
Maxi Big to Force.
Yeah, and I'm like, it's definitely real though. Like there's a difference in like real life and like
Well,
Star Wars is that we know it's real in Star Wars, so it's kind of
there's
interesting.
there's a line in Trials of the Jedi, which I'm not going to spoil the context of the line. I'm not even going to read the full line. But there is a character who points out that there are, at the height of their power, tens of thousands of Jedi. There are trillions of beings in the galaxy.
Right.
And we also see that, like, this was a point that was made when people were confused when Minister Tua in Rebels was like, it had never seen a Jedi, didn't really know about them, et cetera, et cetera. And Tarkin is basically dismissing them and being like, I knew them. They're not that big of a deal. The vast majority of the people in the galaxy might go through their entire lives never seeing a Jedi except on the news. And even then, they're probably barely mentioned. Like the Jedi are
Right.
not as big of a part of the Republic government as the Clone Wars would have you believe. part of the point of the Clone Wars was to maneuver the Jedi into the public view in a negative way. So somebody like Marva, who had one experience with a Force healer 10 years ago, got scammed. That's somebody whose whole experience with the Force is that is going to be like, yeah, of course it's a scam.
Yeah, because I'm also trying to look at it like from the Empire's only what, 16-ish years old by this point. So, the whole Order 66 thing happened when Cassian and Bix were like teenagers, basically. Like they're in
Yep.
their like maybe 30s right now. So like it's been a minute since they've even
I'm sure
been semi-accustomed to it.
I know for a fact someone has a chart and can tell me.
Yeah.
I know for a fact there is a person that I know who could probably tell me exactly how old Cassian is right now. But I think he's around 30.
Right. Well, because technically he's adopted, so we don't actually know when he was born and all that good stuff. But to your point, I think it's like I don't understand sometimes when they try to write characters who just don't believe anything at all when it is technically established in universe that they already exist. So I understand from
The
like
galaxy is
a
huge,
galaxy wide
and they
thing is
haven't been
huge.
around for 16 years.
Right.
And 16 years ago in the real world
Yeah.
was 2009,
Avengers
which
wasn't even out yet.
fuck me, I
So
feel old. Yeah, the Avengers wasn't out.
no,
We did not know 16 years ago that Disney was going to buy Lucasfilm.
that's crazy.
That did not happen until 2012. 16 years ago, we did not have federal protections for gay marriage. And like the number of people who, like particularly young people, this is not a bad thing. I don't say this is a criticism, but there's a lot of young people who have never grown up in a world where gay marriage wasn't
A
legal.
thing. Yeah.
Like there's people who are 19, 20 years old who were 10
Mm,
when Doma was struck down.
right.
Just to give you an idea of how much has changed and how quickly things can change and how quickly public opinion can shift.
That's true.
Yeah. So I actually completely buy, again, if you've never seen a Jedi before, you've only maybe heard about them on the news, they're just another random group, and your one experience with a Force healer was a scam. Yeah, I buy that you would have this negative reaction.
True. Speaking of said Force healer, would you like to know who's
Yes. Do
playing
you
the
want to
Force
talk
healer?
about who is doing the absolutely fucking amazing job
I
as
do,
the
and
Force healer?
I think you're gonna find that some of the things I have to say are gonna make sense. So,
Okay.
the Force healer
This
is
is
played.
this is not Carolyn Blankston, by the way. I know a lot of people saw her and was like, "Is this Carolyn Blankston?" This is not Carolyn Blankston.
Okay, this is Josie Walker. So I didn't really recognize a lot of her films, but this is the other person I said that has a Star Wars connection. So she was in a film called Where Hands Touch, featuring Amanda Stenberg.
Nice.
So she was in that movie, but she's mostly a theater actor. So I saw
Okay.
that she's on the original cast recordings. She's like a singer. So she does The Beautiful Game, Matilda the musical, and everybody's talking about Jamie. So she does a lot of like theater stuff.
Nice. And I pulled up her IMDb page. She was nominated for the Olivier Award 2018 for Best Actress in a Musical for Everybody's Talking About Jamie.
There you go.
And she was nominated for a Laurence Olivier Theater Award in 2001 for Best Actress in a Musical for a performance in The Beautiful Game. And another one in 2020 for supporting role in the play The Ocean at the End of the Lane.
There you go. I told you she's definitely a theater actor. Like you could tell. Like I don't know, she's really good. I really like this character. This character makes me go, why is she here? I don't
She's a
understand.
cook. She's a cook and she does this on her off time.
I'm so I now I know why, and it's not because of Luke, why everybody in Yavin says, "May the Force be with you." It's because of this lady
Because
right here.
it's because she's doing random force stuff.
Yeah, before Luke even gets there, there's
Yeah.
people healing. Like so, I find that very interesting.
Well, I need this woman to have a conversation with Kanan and Ezra,
Hmm.
and I need this woman to have a conversation with Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, I'm wondering if why she never crossed paths with either one of them.
Probably because she's a cook. A lot is explained by the fact that she has a day job, and her day job is to be a cook, and
Right.
she just kind of does religious services on the side.
She's like, "Oh yeah, I'll also heal you for free, just if I feel like it on the side." But I do want to talk about them connecting, I think we'll call it.
Yes. Before
Oh,
you say that, I just need to point out that I find the scene really interesting because it really highlights that Bix is trying to fix her problems and Cassian is trying to ignore his problems. That is something I needed to point out before we really dive into what actually happens with the Force Healer. Their reactions show where they are in their journeys and also how those journeys are starting to diverge. But
oh, okay.
also where Bix is trying to be a good influence on Cassian to be like, you need to address some stuff because Bix has learned to address her trauma.
Right.
She's learned to address it in a healthy way. She's learned to address it without drugs. She's learned to get more of a sense of herself and what she needs. So now we can talk about the actual Force Healer scene.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that are happening here. So one, obviously, she literally touches his wound. So there is a, well, not, she doesn't, she puts her hand in the same
She puts her
place that,
hands on the general thing, which is
right.
very like the Force Healer is very clearly modeled off a real life Faith Healer, which is also why Marva thinks it's a scam.
Okay.
Because I don't know if you've ever seen a Faith Healer in action.
I mean, I've just seen like the cheesy things where they put their palm on people's
Yeah, no, this is
faces.
that.
Yeah, okay.
This is
Yeah.
that. I don't know if your religious upbringing you saw this, but I've seen this
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it's
Yeah, Cassian didn't start convulsing on the ground in
Cassian did
spirit.
not start convulsing on the ground. A thing that
Um,
happens.
yeah, apparently, right. No, but so that's one thing, right? So she touches his shoulder, and then we find out in the next scene that it's starting to feel better. He starts to be like, okay,
Yes,
wait,
it actually
maybe,
does work.
right, this is working. That's one aspect of it. The other thing is what she says about, like, I guess she has some kind of premonition or some kind of feeling, we'll call it. I think she describes it as she just has these feelings that she can't explain or whatever, but she calls him the messenger, roll credits. So we don't need to
Fuck
watch the rest
you.
of we don't need to watch the rest of the episode. She said it.
I'm gonna come
Um,
back to that messenger line here in a second.
okay. I don't, I mean, I get it, but I don't get it. So she keeps saying he's collecting spirit or some kind of like experience or something in his life.
So the way she explains it is that Cassian is basically destined to do something.
Right.
Like the Force, there's a point to this. And we talk about the Force kind of moves everything for balance, right? That's the goal of the Force overall is balance. The Death Star is going to take the Force out of balance. Cassian is kind of being maneuvered to play a major role in bringing the Death Star down, is my interpretation of it. But
Okay, I can see
really,
that.
he's destined for something that the rather than move being the culmination of his experiences, Cassian rather is canonically moving towards something in the future. He has a purpose, he has a point. His point, she thinks, is to be the messenger. Now, in Rogue One, there is a scene when they immediately get off Jeddah after Jen has seen the message from
Her
uh,
father.
get her father, and they didn't grab the message before they evacuated the base.
Right.
And Cassian says to Jen, "You're the messenger," meaning they need to bring her to Yavin 4 so she can tell them what she saw.
Right.
You're the messenger. So for Cassian to be told he's a messenger, that he needs to bring the message, Jen is the message.
Oh, okay.
It's a crazy to watch this and then watch Rogue One.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's absolutely wild. Also, on a note of it's crazy to watch Rogue One, Cassian's experience here definitely adds a lot of context to why he is so over Chirrut immediately.
Right. Yeah, he's like, ugh, another one? Like
It's like another one.
they're everywhere. Yeah.
Uh, I will also point out that the Faith Healer, I said Faith Healer, the
The
Force Healer
Force healer, yeah.
touches Bix kind of close to her stomach and seems to realize something. And Bix also kind of seems to have a moment after the Force Healer says, like, maybe you're where Cassian needs to be. My last note for this section is that we do find out that Bix is having like Force dreams.
I was
Like
gonna
she
say,
mentions having dreams.
yeah.
I think Bix might be a little Force sensitive.
I think this is a point of contention. But yeah,
Mhm.
I think because I think we said this before. I think everybody in this universe is a little force sensitive. I don't think it's like a
They
dramatic
are. It
thing.
comes up in Trials of the Jedi.
Right.
And the Force connects every living thing. And like
Right.
the Force, the way the Force works is it's not that like you're born with the Force or you're not. You're
Right.
born with an innate talent to use it, and everybody has a little bit of it because it connects everybody. It connects
Right.
every living thing,
Correct.
right? So that's how somebody like Sabine in Ahsoka could eventually learn to use the Force. Everybody has the Force. It just takes an insane amount of training and discipline to be able to use.
Right. So I think she is slightly prophetic. So I think she just has some kind of innate ability, but it's not strong enough that she can access it on her own. But it's like, oh, she just has a dream and she has strong feelings and things like that. Section 6. At the base, General Draven confronts Cassian and Wilmon as they prepare to depart without filing a flight plan. Cassian insists it's a personal trip and ignores Draven's warnings about loyalty and procedure. They depart Yavin 4 and jump to hyperspace. In Palmo, Captain Kaido arrives with a group of young, untrained Imperial Army troops expressing frustration over their lack of discipline. Meanwhile, Cassian and Wilmon arrive on Ghorman, and back on Yavin 4, Vel visits Bix. The two discuss how much they've changed, from Luthen's covert operatives to part of a growing rebellion. Vel explains that the rebel leaders are frustrated with Cassian's rogue behavior, and she stresses that he's become important to the cause and must start acting like a leader. Bix reassures her that Cassian will show up when needed.
So, because it is important to the next episode, I do have to slightly correct Bradley's summary. It is Sergeant Bloy that shows up. He is in
Mm,
charge of this particular squad of recruits. Kaido is the guy that is in charge of
I'm sorry.
everything.
He receives them, I should have said, is what
Yeah,
I
no.
meant. Yeah.
I generally, when you've oversimplified something, I'll let it stand.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
is
yeah.
really important to the next episode
Okay.
that Bloy is the guy that is the
Copy that.
sergeant that is in charge of these troops, which we will talk about in a minute because we do have to talk first about the return of General Draven.
Okay.
Did we want to talk about who this actor is?
Oh, I
Because
mean,
I'm pretty sure we talked about him in our Rogue
we
One
yeah, we
coverage,
covered him in
but
Rogue One, so I didn't think to do it.
it
But if you want
is
to bring up his
reprising.
name,
Well, I'll bring up his name
there you
at
go.
least because
Yeah, we don't have to go into full
I
detail, but
fucking
yeah.
love this guy. His name is Alistair Petrie,
Okay.
who is reprising his role from Rogue One. He is playing in Andor General Davit Draven.
This is where we're going to start to see people
People
reprising their
from Rogue
roles.
One are starting to show
Yes.
up. It'll be
Okay.
Draven first, and then the next arc is just a Rogue One prequel.
Yeah. I love
But
that.
Draven is here, rather like
Hmm.
Bail Organa cameoing
Right. It's
in
a quick
the
little,
to
yeah.
get us used to the fact that he is here. He and Cassian are disagreeing, and we also see that like Cassian really doesn't want to commit to the rebellion fully, and he's made some sort of deal
Right.
with them to where he's basically a contractor, which is unfucking heard of on this base. The
Right.
fact that people don't know who he is, the Force healer doesn't know who he is, so he's not in the chain of
Mm,
command. He is probably using the Fulcrum alias at this point. People do not know his name.
right.
He is allowed to have his little space outside of the compound, is allowed to have a space outside of the temple. He is allowed to come and go without correctly filing an exit plan, and they're starting to get sick of his shit.
Yeah, because he says something along the lines of like, there are no privateers here.
Right. And here's the thing about Draven in this episode is that Draven's not wrong. He comes across as a dick in this scene.
Yeah.
He's not wrong. He's like, look, we cannot have people operating outside of this chain of command. This is actually really important to prevent us from turning into the Maya Pay Brigade or turning into Saw Gerrera's partisans. That was why it was so important we saw the Maya Pay Brigade back in episodes 1 through 3, because it's context for why all of this is needed. I also just, there's some random alien in the background that looks like a giant raccoon thing. I'm not sure. It's walking around in the background. I don't know what this alien is.
Oh, I missed it. I don't think I saw that.
You could only see it from the back, but I was like, in such a human-centric show, I was like, oh, there's some aliens here.
Mm. I also thought when Draven's walking up to the U-wing or whatever, I was like, this is almost like the same shot where we saw C-3PO and R2-D2 in Rogue One. Like it was like the same like hangar that he's walking through and everything. And I was like, are they gonna show up? Is Chopper gonna show up randomly? Like where I'm like, some one of these is gonna happen. I'm like, I kept waiting for it. I mean, it doesn't, spoiler alert, none of that ever happens in the rest of the show because I guess it would have been too much of a like,
It would have been a little bit too much.
it's too much. Even though technically it is established already in Rogue One that they are there at some point. So I don't think it would be that weird of an Easter egg cameo thing, but I could see why it would be annoying.
They're on the Tanaviv 4.
Right.
And the Tanaviv 4, well, they're not in this episode because the Tanaviv 4 is not here. Bail Organa has not joined the rebellion.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's not for another year, I guess.
That's not for another year.
You're right.
So
So I
in
guess
the
it doesn't make
next
sense in the
block
show.
of episodes, the Tanaviv 4 is on Yavin because it's on Yavin 4 because it transported
Right.
Bail Organa to Yavin 4.
Okay. So I guess it makes it. Yeah, Chopper is busy right now, I guess. That's
Chopper is
fine.
also busy. Chopper is on Adelon right now,
Right. Murdering people.
on the appropriate named Chopper base. I actually do think it's either this season or the last season is the season he blows up the capital ships
Right. Escalating his kill count to millions.
to tens of thousands.
Tens
Chopper
of
does not
thousands.
have a
Okay.
kill count in the millions.
He doesn't? Okay. I need to look
Uh,
it up.
the only person in the rebellion that has a kill count in the millions is Luke Skywalker
Interesting.
because no, Lando Calrissian. Lando blows up the second Death Star.
Oh,
Anyway, there is a squad of, I can only describe them as fascist twinks
I like that.
that they have now, in order to counter the Ghorman bellhop twink, they have moved a squad of fascist twinks, which Dedra is not happy about.
Right. She's like, who are these guys? What the fuck are they doing here? I don't know them. I don't know who they are.
She
I
calls
can't
them
control them.
children.
Right. Well, they're young and yeah.
And like Bloy, Sergeant Bloy, who is the guy that is in charge of the squadron, actually kind of seems like a bad pick too. Because
Yeah,
his
because he makes
his
like a joke
very
or whatever.
first reaction
Yeah.
to talking to Captain Kaido is a sarcastic aside.
Right. He's just being funny. He's like, haha, they're not real men yet, but we'll make them,
Or he's
like
slightly annoyed. So he's a dude who very clearly, this squadron was handpicked by Kaido
this was
because it has
100%.
a bunch of little fascist twinks that have
Yep.
never really seen combat, and they're being led by a guy who is very clearly not up to snuff with imperial discipline.
Right.
So there's a guy who's going to not necessarily be somebody that can be trusted to keep imperial discipline the whole time. And that's very deliberate for what we're going to see in the next episode.
Right. Someone who will make sure to fuck up.
Exactly. There is a shot in the middle of Wilmon and Cassian flying in. And I just have the note that I think it's so funny that Wilmon hates flying.
Yeah. I like how Cassian is fucking with him. Like he's kind of like, you
Yeah.
said to come in close, like, and I
They
did.
look, they have both like a weird parental relationship, but also kind of a fraternal relationship where Cassian's sort of fucking with him,
Right.
which I love that. Okay, so we find out that Vel has been off smuggling and that she's decided to come back and like recommit to the rebellion, which I do wish this was more than just an aside.
I know.
I wanted a little more from this.
This is where the disappointing Vel storyline starts for me. And I just kind of like,
Yeah, because like
mm,
they killed off Senta and then gave her fuck all chance to react to it. Like
right. And
she
now, yeah.
she does what Senta did in the last arc, where she talks about a character arc that we did not see
And I hate that.
because you can see the cuts. You can see the cuts and the chops in the season.
Yep.
And Vel has now served her narrative purpose, and she's gonna get choppy chop.
She's just here. They don't want to kill her because there's not a reason to. And so it's just kind of like, well, she just lives on Yavin base, I
He's
guess.
there.
Like, I don't know what
Well,
she's doing.
I think it's important to her character that she went off. She did some other stuff outside and then
Yeah.
decided to commit specifically to Yavin and not to Luthen because fuck Luthen. Luthen got sent to killed. Luthen and Clea got sent to killed. So
Right.
fuck him. And like she is going to commit to this rebellion. She's also matured, which we kind of see. But again, this is all a bunch of character development that we did not see at all. It happened off screen. We do get a mention, the very first mention of General Yandodana. Yandodana will not appear in this show, but he is all over it. He is the guy that is in charge of the Yavin Cell. He is played by Barristan Selmy from Game of Thrones in Rogue One. So they probably just couldn't get that guy back.
Right. And then it's kind of like, well, he's
Also,
not
he's
central to the plot.
pretty old.
Yeah,
at this
yeah, I was gonna
point.
say.
I don't know if he's still acting. I don't know what he's doing, but they just couldn't get him back, or they didn't want to recast the role, or they just decided that character is not that important.
Right.
You can actually see the moment where Bix makes some sort of decision in her conversation with Vel. We do not yet know what that decision was.
Yeah, I find it interesting that Vel's kind of like,
Right.
well, Cassian's a little distracted right now. We really need you to, encourage him to kind of show up for work when we need him,
Please have
like
him come into the office. I am begging you.
because right now all the rebel leaders are really pissed off at him for taking all these vacation days, and we really need him to come back to work. And I don't know what's distracting him so much. That it's like almost as if he has like a really clingy girlfriend who's just like distracting him too much. And like, I need you
Well,
to.
I don't know if she's clingy
No,
because
I'm joking, but
yeah, I think the rebel leaders might think so.
no, well, I think they think that anything is a distraction. I don't think it's
Right,
necessarily Bix isn't necessarily the problem. I think it's just anything, any connection is
right.
a distraction.
Yeah, it's interesting too that the rebel leaders know enough to like, okay, go send Vel to go talk to the voice of reason
Right.
because Bix is the only one that can get Cassian to do anything.
Section 7. In Palma Plaza, disguised among the locals, Cassian and Wilmon coordinate their plan to assassinate Dedra. Cassian checks into a hotel, posing as a reporter, and in his hotel room, he scopes out the Imperial building through a telescope. He prepares his equipment, hidden in a false bottom suitcase, including a disassembled blaster and surveillance tools. Cassian maintains contact with Wilmon using coded phrases. As he studies the building where Dedra is stationed, he sits silently, mentally preparing for the assassination.
Wilmon and Cassian are just here to kill Dedra.
They literally don't care about anything else.
Well, Wilmon cares. Cassian does
Well,
not.
true.
Cassian is just here to kill this woman,
That's right.
which they are very clearly doing it because of what she did to Ferrex. Like
Yeah, I think,
they
yeah, I think
say
it's
Stone and
his,
Sky to each other. They're
right.
very clear that they are there.
Yeah.
He is there to assassinate Dedra because of what she did on.
Right. Because I think in the earlier conversation, Wilman makes the point of saying, like, well, this is not for revenge. He's like, this is justice. Like, there's a difference. And I mean, yes and no. Like, I feel like in this particular instance, yes, I think it would be justice to have something happen to her, right? However,
You're
because
kind of
of
there for revenge. Don't
you're,
fucking lie.
yeah, Wilman's definitely the fact that he even bothered to mention the fact that his father died, like, no, you're there for revenge, then there's no other reason. There's no other
Anyone
reason.
who says I am not doing this for revenge is definitely doing this for revenge.
Yeah.
You mentioned Cassian having a false bottom to his suitcase. Speaking of bottoms,
Oh God.
this twink immediately recognizes him,
First
which
of
I
all,
think is great.
you need to show some respect on Hotel Twink. You don't know what he likes.
This is true. I don't know what Cassian likes either.
Well, we don't know what Varian Sky likes.
Odd.
We know what Cassian likes. We don't know what Varian Sky likes.
I'm just saying.
Or what's the
This
reporter's fake name? Whatever the reporter's name is also we don't know if he's
was like
also
Rooney Guja
yeah. I don't think
or
he's gay.
something.
I don't think the reporter's gay, unfortunately.
Well, this twink definitely recognizes this hot man from a year ago,
Oh, I bet he does.
which is a little silly on the one hand, but on the other hand, Cassian is very hot.
I that's the other thing is like when I first watched this scene, I thought, oh wait, maybe he genuinely doesn't recognize him. But then I was like, there's no way.
He puts him in the same room.
Yeah. I think I missed that in the first viewing. Like I was just kind of watching it to watch it. Now that I've obviously gone back, he purposefully picks that room. He purposefully says like, "Oh, there's an issue with this other group or whatever." So you obviously have the room now available. Like,
We can kind of see actually that if you look at the computer monitor, we can sort of see he's not checking Cassian in,
right. Because
which
what does he
is
say? Something like, "Oh, they're
something he
gonna
will
check in the
mention in
morning."
so what he says is that his coworker is going to report that Cassian did not register.
Right.
Cassian claims that he went straight from the airport basically to the hotel and because he didn't want to get caught in the curfew. And so the twink warns him like, hey, she's going to register. Also, he doesn't check Cassian in.
Right.
So
He
if
just
the
kind of gives
Empire
him the
calls the hotel and asks for Cassian, there's no record.
right.
The only people who know that Cassian checked in are these two people. Like the twink is madly covering for him right now.
Right. Well, I mean, if you're gonna commit some kind of
Commit
murder,
commit to the bit.
yeah.
It is also the same room, probably so we can reuse the sets.
I was gonna say my headcanon obviously is that oh he just really liked the room so he was like you know what let me just give you the same room. The real reason in production is they just used the same exact set because they needed
They
to.
used the same exact set because they only had to build one hotel room set.
And most hotel rooms look exactly the same, so it's fine.
Yeah, and also like I don't know if this set was necessarily part of the Ghorman set because I've now seen that set and I don't think it goes this high. So it makes it kind of easy. You build one set, you do the scenes from the last arc and this arc, and then
Right.
you tear down. You build it in a soundstage, basically,
Sure.
which is probably what this was. We do see that Wilmon's kind of making eyes at Drina. So Wilmon has got yet another girlfriend.
And that's why he wants to come back so badly. I thought about it and I was like, wait a minute. I don't know if he necessarily, I mean, yeah, he probably cares about the revenge against Dedra, but like, I feel like he
Wilmon is
wanted to
this
come back
weird
for other
mix of
reasons.
non-committal to where he's loyal to Luthen, but he wants Dedra dead, but he also clearly cares a lot about the Ghorman front.
Yeah.
And he really cares about Drina. We will
Mm,
find out. So shout out to Wilman for immediately getting another girlfriend.
love that.
Good job. And my final note is I didn't really understand the stormtrooper thing the first couple of times I watched. What I did realize after the fact is that the reason that the stormtroopers are important is it's demonstrating Cassian can't take the shot at Dedra from the hotel room.
Oh, I see. Because it's
So the
monitored. Yeah.
original plan was to try to get a hotel room that faced the plaza so they can take a
Ah,
shot from the hotel room
right.
and directly, because that's a straight line into the ISB office. And now he can't do that because in order to, he would either have to call a lot of attention to himself by opening up the door
Right.
massively. He would not be protected by the glare from the glass. He would not be protected by the glass. He would have to stick the barrel out through the door. And if he's doing that, the stormtroopers directly above him on their stations will see it.
Right.
So now he's going to have to get creative.
That's what James Bond does. Gets creative.
Yep. Unfortunately, Cassian does not have a watch with gizmos. He has a gun and the concepts of a plan.
I also thought, why doesn't Cassian have like a droid? Like, why doesn't he have a Lola or a BD1? Like, why doesn't he have like a
Well,
thing?
he had B2EMO,
Yeah, but
but
that's
they
not
left
a
him on
very
Mina Rao
stealthy droid. I'm talking about one that like can do things for him, you know?
for the exact same reason that Lola wound up totally betraying them and leading the Empire to Jabim. They're
Okay.
an operational hazard.
I guess you're right. That's why he
Mhm.
doesn't hang out with droids all the time.
Yeah, they're an operational hazard. They can be reprogrammed, they can be hacked. If you're a stealth operative, you really don't want a droid. That's all my notes. Hey, Bradley, you mentioned before we have new writer and director.
We sure do. So let's start with director because I don't have a lot of information on him. The director
Okay.
is Janice Metz is his name. I didn't recognize anything that he did. Couldn't tell you a thing. If I saw that man walking down the street, couldn't tell you.
Okay. Well, good job on
Um,
these episodes.
but
You did direct
good for
some of
him.
my favorite Star Wars ever.
Yeah. And then the writer, on the other hand, you would obviously know, is Dan Gilroy, known for obviously writing some of the episodes, the Eldani arc in the first season, and then also he wrote the screenplay for The Bourne Legacy and Kong Skull Island, and then he was also a writer director on the film Nightcrawler. So,
And he is Tony Gilroy's brother.
oh yeah, that also that little bit,
Yeah, he is also Tony Gilroy's brother.
just a little tiny connection there.
All right, Bradley, what are your final thoughts on this episode?
Final thoughts. I thought this was a great build for what's about to come. Knowing what's about to come in the next bit, I think this episode does pretty solidly set up everything without being boring. I feel like there are moments, but I feel like everything in here I really wanted to see. There were things that I really wanted to pay attention to, and like every character that has like a beat in this is like it is important to know what's happening in this episode to set up the next bit. My only thing is that I don't remember the third episode of the arc as well in connection to this because it's more like the Mon Mothma episode. So I feel like it's kind of like this is more of a two episode arc, and then the Mon Mothma episode's more like the fallout. I feel like, right? Am I wrong? And I feel like the climax is next week of the Gorman massacre, and then it's no.
We'll see. We'll see how we feel with the that interpretation as we go forward because I think they blend pretty seamlessly into each other.
Okay. I mean, again, it's been a minute since I've watched them all, so I I think that's my thought process. Maybe it'll change next week. We'll see. And I'll call myself out if that is the case.
Okay.
But I think for the most part, I felt like this is a little bit faster and shorter of an arc. It just feels like a little bit more like it's moving quicker. The other two arcs were very slow. They were very slow builds. And I feel like this one is not that. I don't think that happens at all in this arc. This is a very like we get this little mini episode right here where it's like, okay, we had to establish some stuff, but then it's like next week nonstop action.
Yeah, that leads into my final thought, which is we're done setting shit up after this arc.
We're done.
We
We're
have
done.
set up the shit to the
Mm,
extent that we are gonna set it up. And the next arc is gonna be set up for Rogue One, but it's also gonna be so insanely structured and move at such an insane pace that we won't even notice. So this is the end of the setup. At this point, the pieces are into place to light this entire thing up. And it's going to be lit up for the entire rest of the show. All right,
Cool.
Bradley, what episode are we talking about next week?
Next week is Who Are You?
Pluggables. Bradley has a whole lot of reality TV that he works on. You can find it on Peacock, Bravo, and Netflix, including such shows as Temptation Island, King's Court, coming July 13th to Bravo, Queen's Court, later seasons of Married to Medicine, and The Circle. You can find me on the Star Wars TTRPG podcast For Light and Dice. That has just come back from hiatus. New episodes are dropping, and we are scheduled actually to record a new session. By the time you have heard this episode, we will have recorded more content for that show. You can also find queer books that I write. Those are called Beach House Studios. You can go to my social media at CWRogers6 and you can find all the links to that. Also, I am still doing that Star Wars EU convention. It is now called Legacy Expo, an expanded universe event that is in Burbank, California, September 13th through 14th. If you are interested in the EU, you do not have to be a fan to attend this event. You can just have an interest in learning more about it. There will be panels and there will be people there who would be happy to info dump on you. Or you could meet some of the people that created it. So Legacy Expo, September 13th to 14th in Burbank, California. Bradley, I need to get back to Trials of the Jedi. Please run our socials. Thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze. Did Charles fuck something up? Email us at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com and let us know. You can follow us on BlueSky, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Gold Squadron Gaze. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Gold Squadron Gaze, where we post full episodes of this podcast. If you like the podcast, you can also rate us and review us on your favorite podcast app of choice. Please join us next week and every week for another episode of Gold Squadron Gaze.
Pablo Hidalgo, where are you? He's gonna join the call in just a second. I'm gonna have him.
Yes.
I'm gonna ask
We're
him
going to
real
have
quick.
Pablo Hidalgo on
No,
the
but
podcast.